All right, with that, we will open our joint agenda of our Selma City Council and Selma Kingsburg Fowler County Sanitation District Board of Directors Special Meeting. It's March 26, 2024 at 9 a.m. in the Selma City Council Chambers at 1710 Tucker Street in Selma, California. The teleconference phone number is 301-715-8592. The webinar ID is 891-6864-5005. When on the phone, if you wish to address the council during the public comment portion of the agenda, press star 9 to raise your hand. We will select you from the meeting queue. Press star 6 to unmute and mute yourself. Would you call the roll, please, City Clerk?
Councilmember Guerra. Councilmember Mendoza Navarro.
Here.
Councilmember Trujillo.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cho. Mayor Robertson.
Here.
Oh,
Call
forgive
roll
me.
For the SKF?
Yes. Board of Director Magzik. Hara. I'm sorry, Mejia. Palomar.
Here.
Thank you. And Chairman Mendez.
Here.
And Mayor Robertson sitting as both.
That's right, serving both roles today. Potential conflicts of interest. Any council member has a potential conflict of interest or board member may now identify the item and recuse themselves from discussing and voting on the matter, which is not an issue because there are no voting matters today. Moving on, there is a difference in the agenda. So we're going to open this up to a discussion. This is the agenda changes or deletion item. And with that, I'll open it up and pass it to SKF Council Hilda Cantu Montoy.
Mayor, good morning, members of the City Council and members of the Board of Directors for SKF. There is, as the mayor has noted, there is a discrepancy in the two agendas. There had been numerous discussions on Thursday evening and then Friday between your respective executives. And ultimately, there was a request by the city to put discussion of the budget and the CIP on. And Ms. Cazares noted to Selma that the budget, neither the budget nor the CIP have been presented to the board, so they're not ready to discuss that. Then but she did add methodology for CIP to just talk about the methodology. So, and then posted the agenda, as you can see on the agenda, that's 1 through 6 for Selma, for SKF. However, there must have been some disconnect because the City of Selma still issued an agenda that included discussion of the SKF budget and development of capital improvement program. So there's been discussions this morning, and the suggestion is to use the SKF agenda, and for number 6, use methodology for CIP and methodology for the budget, which Mr. Santillan and their legal counsel have both agreed upon. So that would be, so it's if you're looking at the agenda from SKF 1 through 6, on number 6, add and methodology for budget.
Okay, so for the record, and methodology for budget will be added to the minutes when they are published for this as an agenda item that occurred for this joint meeting. Is that correct?
What I would recommend is a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
Okay.
That motion, if that's okay.
And is there a second?
Second.
Call the roll, please. Oh, before we call the roll, is there any discussion on the floor?
Just one quick question. Has the budget been approved? Yeah, if I'm not, that's a discussion I have for you.
No, it hasn't been presented to the
Yeah.
board.
I understand, and just out of hearsay, has the SKF imposed any kind of increases to the cities?
No.
And if I may, members of the board and city council, and to add to what Ms. Cantu was mentioning about our discussion with regard to the budget, the request to add the budget was not necessarily to discuss the current budget proposal for the next fiscal year. It was very similar to our request to discuss the development process for the CIP as well as the budget, because both of them go hand in hand. So we weren't looking for a discussion about any specific fiscal year, but just a discussion around what SKF's process is for both CIP and budget.
I think with the modification we've just made to the agenda, where on number 6, we're going to talk about the methodology for CIP and the budget. That'll do exactly what you're looking for. So appreciate that.
And with that, we'll call the roll.
Director Magzig,
Aye.
Director Palomar,
Aye.
Chairman Mendez,
Aye.
and we'll go down, city council members as well. Sitting both as Mayor Robertson and Board of Director Robertson,
Aye and yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Cho, Councilmember Mendoza Navarro,
Aye.
Councilmember Trujillo,
Yes.
Councilmember Guerra. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, City Clerk. And with that, we will go to oral communications. At this time, any member of the public may address the council or the board on any item on the special meeting agenda over which the council and the board have jurisdiction. No action or discussion will be taken on any item not on the agenda. Issues raised will be referred to the board for review. Members of the public are asked to limit their remarks to 3 minutes. Do we have any oral communications at this time? Do we have anyone on the phone or online who would like to say anything?
As a reminder to those participating online, please use your raise your hand feature and we will add you to the meeting queue. Mayor Robertson, at this time, I see no hands raised.
For that, and at this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to our chair of SKF, Supervisor Buddy Mendez. Buddy, take it away.
Okay, so we'll move to development projects. Bring this back.
Yeah, so this item, and correct me if I'm wrong, General Manager Gassad, is essentially an overview for both the board and the council of projects that are happening in Selma that are relevant to SKF, that have some involvement with SKF. Obviously, all projects technically do if they're connecting to our sanitary system. But in general, those projects that significantly impact the system, that cause upgrades or improvements to our existing system. So I'm going to turn it over to our deputy city manager, who has the background of most of those projects.
Thank you, City Manager. Just to review some of the major development projects, I think the district and the city are both aware of the recently approved Amberwood Sewer trunk line on the east side of town. Bond financing is available for that, and that would kind of jumpstart the Amberwood specific plan, which is over 2,000 units on the east side of town. That's a huge project that's going to require significant coordination with SKF, with getting the plans approved, which are done, went out to bid, and that will be awarded, I believe, at the Monday City Council meeting. So that is a significant project that has required significant coordination between the district and the city. You also have a couple of multifamily projects located on Nebraska. You have the Casa de Villa apartment project, a 40-unit project that is directly south of the recently upgraded Nebraska sewer line. That project does require some other enhancements to the sewer system downstream that the applicant is aware of, as well as another 144-unit apartment project located on the northeast corner of Nebraska and Highland. Both projects have been conditioned in the same manner through discussions with the district regarding, obviously, the Clarkson lift station is a significant upgrade that is required to support both projects, but you also have it's the Sheridan line, which has limited capacity, which is on a first come, first served basis, that would need to be upgraded when it reaches capacity. Currently, I don't believe those projects are impacted by that based on a meeting we had last week with the district. However, that is an upgrade that will be needed in the immediate future. You also have the Sunset lift station, or I'm sorry, Sheridan line does need to be upgraded as a downstream improvement. It's the Sunset lift station that currently has capacity on a first come, first served basis that will be evaluated as projects are submitted to the district and the city for development. There is also the Nebraska line, which requires a parallel 10-inch line to support development on the west side of Highland, as well as a lift station or pump station at the intersection of Highland and Nebraska. We also have, significant development proposed in the northwest part of town along the Floral Avenue corridor that would require the Rose Avenue lift station, Rose Avenue trunk line to be upgraded from a 10 to a 15-inch, I believe. Those improvements, the city has applied for funding for those items, but those are improvements that also would unlock development. And then you also have the Dinuba sewer trunk line on the north part of town. The city has been receiving applications for development for upwards of 10 years in that location, and we continue to receive applications in that area as it relates to the improvement of that line. Significant funding through additional bond financing has been proposed to construct that line. But there's been ongoing discussions with the district about interim facilities or something along those lines for years, not just recently, but that's been a conversation that the district has had with the city for some time. But in all, the city overall has anywhere from, depending on how you look at it, 2,000 to almost 4,000 units in process that would be in need of infrastructure improvements.
Thank you, Jerome. I think that's a pretty accurate, a couple of things there, but I think a testament to the improved communications between the city. We're learning how to talk planning language and engineering language. So yes, all those things are in the queue, and there's some opportunity out there.
Are there any questions about the projects currently in line in Selma? And I would just add, thank you, Deputy City Manager Keene, for that overview. There are a few other projects that are currently in the works that are not necessarily formal submittals yet. We are tracking those to see how they might impact, the master plan, the SKF master plan. I do appreciate SKF's flexibility in terms of amending the master plan, the adopted master plan. We did that a year and a half ago, and identified opportunities where we might be able to reprioritize some projects to accommodate the most the development that's most nearest to fruition. So definitely want to thank the staff for that. Other than that, that was really the purpose of that, just to give the board and the council a good perspective of where we are as far as development goes. There is a lot of interest in development in Selma, which makes it that much more critical that the communication, as General Manager Cassett has said, it continues to improve and becomes more streamlined as we proceed with these projects. We do have a grant application in with the Economic Development Administration for about $3.5 million. That would essentially support commercial development on the west side of the 99 along the Floral corridor that Deputy City Manager mentioned. And that is a combination of improvements to the size of the line, or increases to the size of the line, but also improvements to the lift stations along Floral, and potentially some new lift stations that would also support development on the north side of Floral to the west of the hotel that was just built. I think that grant is going to go a long way if we're awarded in terms of helping us build out the infrastructure. And so we would just look for, SKF to be able to help streamline the process of the review. I know there were some, hiccups and holdups when we were looking at, the upgrade for Clarkson Lift Station. We got that all sorted out. That one's been awarded and construction is going to start soon. But I think us, communicating to SKF about, what's coming down the line, and then SKF being prepared with the staff and the capacity and the engineers to be able to review those on a timely basis and get us the comments that we need to be able to approve those projects right away is going to be extremely critical for us to not lose the momentum on these projects that are coming up. So if any of my staff has anything else to say, feel free.
Nathan's got something to
Oh,
say.
yes, sir.
Yeah, quick question with that. So has Selma done a sewer master plan, where you've identified which areas are going to develop first, what upgrades you're going to make to lift stations, trunk lines, and then prioritized it. So as you look out, you talk about over the course of the next 10 years, you know, and you've got between 2,000 and 4,000 lots potentially in the queue, where these are going to fall. Because with that master plan, what it allows our staff to do here is they can look out, and as they develop CIP for, you know, the district, and they time other projects in the other cities and throughout the whole system, they also can make sure that they carve out enough time for themselves to do different reviews. So that way they're not surprised by a project that maybe is dropped on them, and there needs to be review within a matter of 2 or 3 months when they've got a number of other projects working. So has there been a sewer master plan done that looks at all these major improvements that need to be done, and then the trigger points when you're going to begin this? Because I know you talked about also applying for grant funding. So a lot of this infrastructure may not happen until you secure the appropriate funding.
Yeah. No, that's a great question, Supervisor Magzig. You know, and I'm glad you asked that, because I think historically the reliance has always been from the City of Selma side on SKF to develop those master plans. And for whatever reason, and I can only presume it's because SKF is responsible for maintaining, you know, the system. And, you know, it's from our perspective, the staff that's here now, you know, the city should really be the ones who are planning and who are, because we're closest to the developers, and we know, you know, we have better communication and better understanding of which projects are more ready for development. And so the current process with SKF that they're undergoing with their master plan update, there's been a lot of communication back and forth about which projects are closest to development and which are not. And I think we've given a lot of data to SKF, and we've had communications with John about, you know, what's the 5-year horizon, 10-year horizon, 15-year horizon. Ultimately, the city is responsible for our own growth planning. And so the master planning process eventually needs to fall on us in collaboration with SKF, from my perspective, because we master plan for everything from sewer from storm drain to streets to all of our critical infrastructure, water with Cal Water. And it shouldn't be any different with SKF. And so that is the basis for a lot of the requests for information that we've been issuing to SKF, because we need that data to sort of do our own parallel master planning process. Because, you know, we know that SKF is understaffed, under-resourced. You know, there's no engineer there, there's consultants, but, you know, from a staff perspective, we need to be able to take control of our own development and how that growth is planned. And so when we don't have that information, you know, readily available, it becomes a little more difficult to do that. But things are improving from that perspective.
And I appreciate this discussion on this, because sometimes things are kind of lost in translation. I know I was on the council in Mayor Clovis for 16 years. We developed a sewer plant, did a lot of trunk lines. And so as I look back at my time in the city and how we prepared general plans, master plans, you know, did our water studies, sewer studies, how important it is to make sure that all those are done kind of seamlessly and in order. You mentioned that you're responsible for like storm drain systems. And one thing that's critical is, as you tear streets up, you want to tear them up once. You want to put all this infrastructure down into the ground simultaneously. And maybe as one trustee up here, maybe I'm just not aware about how some of these things work. But right now, with the charges that we have to the different cities, is it our responsibility to prepare the master plans about when we are going to, you know, put sewer and trunk lines in, or do we rely on the cities to help with telling us when they're going to grow and how they're going to grow? Because again, that's very important to do this together. If we're not charging for some of these studies, because they can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, we need to make sure that we collect appropriate fees and bring in the appropriate consultants to do all this, so there's never a delay for you.
If I can just really quick add something to what you stated, because it is really crucial, and you actually stated something that really hits to the City of Selma. CIP projects, the actual capital improvement projects that the SKF proposes for the city of Selma's growth pattern. My question in regards to what you just stated was that as you guys are approving, the board approving the CIP projects that pertain to cities, do you guys go back and analyze what projects you actually put on the table and what projects you actually completed? Because when you turn around and you look at your CIP projects and you propose them, because I sat on the board and I viewed this, my question, and it still is the same question, is that the projects you put up for capital improvements and you string them and you have them and you impose them and you say, this is what we're going to bring to you. This is what we're going to complete. And you go and you end up finding out that you have something else come up, and then all of a sudden you push that project back and you push it back and you push it back and I agree with you 100%. If there's something that has to be analyzed and you have to get a consultant, it's going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars. We should be the ones that probably foot that bill because that's going to better our city. But at the same time,
So I need to push back a little bit. I hear what you're saying, but you have to remember who this board is made up of. It's made up of a representative from each city. And then it has 2 supervisors. And so our board, we set policy for staff. And so if there's an issue on timing, or if a city desires to move something forward, really it's the responsibility of that board member to bring that up and talk about
I hear
maybe
you.
changing
100%.
priorities.
You're misunderstanding what I'm stating is
Sure.
that you guys the board is proposing CIP capital or the staff, understanding the staff submits CIP projects to the board. Board overlooks and sees the policies and follows through, as I understand.
Well, we can change it too. We have the authority to
So
change.
my question is, the capital improvement projects that you propose on the city on yearly X, it's put on the table, but yet it does not get completed for this year. And then next year, and it gets and doesn't get completed. My question is, does the board review the following last year's budget and see what they actually completed versus what they proposed?
Yes, we do a mid-year budget review, and I don't want to
Okay.
steal Veronica's thunder, but she can talk a little bit
And
more
this
about
is,
some of this.
and I want to hit another point that as an elected official, we are stewards of the overall budget of what the cost is, right? And we understand that, and we see, and we know that we don't just walk in a meeting, just vote and walk out. We make sure that we're actually looking and I respect that you guys all sit in this board and you guys give us a input as to what's betterment for our city. But at the same time, as the city manager stated, it is in the best interest of the city to make sure that we actually follow through with our budget, what's going to propose in our city. So when we ask these questions, they're questions that have come up to been asked, and that's why we're bringing them up. It's in a matter of one of the clearest points is that this capital improvement project that you propose isn't followed through and completed. And if anything, if you guys can go back, and I've asked for this the last 5 years, the proposed budget requests or proposed budgets you guys approved, have they all been completed for the city of Selma?
Well, let's answer that right now. So over the course of the last couple of years, 3 years, 5 years, there been any CIP projects we haven't delivered on? Some have been over budget, but let's talk about the ones that have met budget and we've had resources for here for just a second.
Well, we're just wrapping up the sewer improvements for last budget. And then this year, we already awarded all our design work for this year's budgets. Yeah, and then we'll start next year's right quick after July 1.
Have we
So
completed?
you're saying that in the last couple of
Hang
years.
on, let her finish.
But we've completed last budgets, and this budgets, we started design work.
So you're stating that all the projects that you put on the CIP projects have been completed?
Right, for the most part. And if we
Yeah.
don't have funds, then we have to.
So,
Re-
but okay, so you
re-
said you don't have funds, so I can understand this. It's
yeah.
nothing about anybody getting upset. It's, so I can understand this. You propose CIP projects. To your board.
Let's step back a little bit, back to the master plan. So you're talking about master plan. This is started with master
Oh,
plan. So
So let me just pull that question back and keep on with the,
we're talking about master plan first. Okay, so there are CIPs in the master plan that's based on what the city tells us. So the general plans put in, the land uses put in, projects are put out. For Selma, most of the projects are expansion projects. So those are not district CIP projects.
Yeah, and I think that's
So there's a difference between what's put out in the CIP and what the needs are for growth. And so for Selma, there are new lines as Deputy City Manager Jerome said. Have new lines coming in, and then we also have some other lines for north, east, and southwest. So as far as now, current budget, we're wrapping up a project that's going to be finalized for all three cities here in our next board meeting. And then we've started design work for this year's projects for R&R, for the cities and for the district. And then you throw in paving projects. So sometimes we get a paving project late and we have to pivot. An example would be the alley project there between Floral and Chestnut. So we had to defer some projects because that line needed to be done, but the city was going to pay. The other example is the city was in a real big hurry to pave Nebraska. And 10-inch sewer main was put in as per a previous version of the master plan.
What year was that, General Manager?
The paving project
Yeah.
in Nebraska.
Mhm.
That was before Yamal Beenhorn became city engineer, like right before that.
2020.
Right.
Okay.
And the master plan changed as per the request of the city. So the 10-inch that was put in was not sufficient. So now a parallel 10-inch needs to be put in the future. And in the haste of the city, the paving project was done. So yes, some projects are delayed because we have to reevaluate what we're doing because we don't want to tear up the road right after you put fresh pavement on there. An emergency can come up. The staff can come and say, hey, we have this really big issue over here on this line, and this is not just for Selma, it's for both Keysburg and Fowler. In that case, we will go over there, evaluate it, and be, oh, maybe we need to do this. So projects do get bumped. And we don't know what those projects are going to cost. So say one project is $400,000, and then all of a sudden we have another urgent need, it may be more. So that's where you would see some of those changes. District strives in getting those projects done. We have a lot of plant projects. We have projects in Selma, Keysburg, and Fowler. We have pump station projects. And I hope that answers your question.
General Manager, and thank you for those comments. I think one issue that came up with the development of the current master plan that's under development, and it was an issue raised not just by Selma, but I think Kingsburg as well, was, we're planning for growth, right? That's the purpose of the master plan. We're not necessarily looking at, the R&R type of projects that are normally part of SKF CIP. However, there was a real lack of data that we were able to obtain from Mr. Wells to be able to assess how are we prioritizing besides the development timeline for these projects? How are we able to assess whether these projects that are being master planned by SKF are actually supported by the data that's being collected in terms of the flow data and other engineering data that our own engineers have the capacity of reviewing. And that was one of the struggles I think that we've had in terms of assessing this growth planning process. And then ultimately that does become a CIP development issue, but from a higher level perspective, what is the basis for how we're prioritizing what's in the master plan? If you're saying it's an 18-inch line, where's the flow data that supports that? Or if you're saying it should be kept at the same diameter, and so we were asking those kinds of questions. And to Supervisor Magzik's point, the City of Selma is interested in the entire scope of the utility services that are provided within the City of Selma, regardless of whether SKF is the one that's collecting the rates or the payments from the residents, from the account holders. We still need to make sure that that is adequate for our planned growth, because we have a general plan, and right now there's a little bit of a disconnect, or has been in the past, with how that general plan fits into SKF's developed master plan, right? And so I think, the CIP, the R&R kind of stuff, I think there's other issues with regard to, And we can get to that, with regard to how it's budgeted, how the cost estimates are developed, how, we're adjusting for inflation so that we're not over budget. But at the end of the day, I think if we can work in tandem with the district's engineers and get that data as it's collected, without necessarily having any roadblocks, I think that would be ideal for our engineers to be able to say, yes, this is definitely what we need to support this development.
So back to the master plan, what I heard Veronica just talk about is that 10-inch line that was put in the ground back in 2020, 2021. That was in accordance with your master plan, but apparently plans changed. And so we built in accordance with the approved master plan, and it was changed, and it became apparent that a larger line should have gone. I think what's needed is as you are planning for your development and you give us master plans, recognizing that there are going to be tweaks, oversize these lines. So it's much better to put a bigger line in than have to put 2 barrels in later, because it impacts the street and it's very expensive. Or if you put a bigger line in, it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but it's not going to be devastating. But everything that you're talking about right now, what I'm hearing from our staff is taking place. But the one disconnect is that there are some developments that have come online, or developers that are interested in certain areas that maybe weren't planned. Maybe there were general plan amendments that were done here at the city. If you do general plan, and maybe I'm wrong, but if there were general plan amendments done and more intense developments in areas that weren't identified in the sewer master plan or in the general plan of the city, that is going to have impacts on our system to be able to flow sewer. And so maybe one of the things that I would ask is, as you're working with the developers and you're looking at different areas to change land use, talk with us on the front end of that. Because if you approve these things, then you try to work with us to make these changes, it can be difficult, because some of those lines, the city's responsible for putting in, but where you tie into our trunk lines that move that sewer to our plant, sometimes those lines have to be expanded too, or a second barrel has to be put in. So if you're able to do a master plan and stick with it for the next 30 years, that's ideal for the district.
Yeah, and I've never seen a master plan that doesn't change over time, right? And I think, but that's absolutely the goal. I think, going back to the discussions at the PAC meetings with Mr. Wells and the data that was presented to us as the development or took place of the master plan, we were asking, okay, we understand these lines, you're recommending for them to be sized a certain way, but they're going to connect to our existing infrastructure at some point. And so where's the data that shows us, whether what you're proposing is actually going to be suitable for the existing lines, and then ultimately how that ties into your CIP for the existing lines. And I think that's part of what we were asking, and Mr. Horn, our city engineer, can probably elaborate on that, and as well as the process as to how we were asking for the data when we received it, and how that can be streamlined in terms of us verifying this information.
Yeah, so it's the first process that I've been involved in as the city engineer, and I appreciate the collaboration. But from what's tasked for me on the city side of being able to understand our current infrastructure, and as we master plan for future growth, and be able to see what those flows and how they're impacting our infrastructure, I was coming into it as this is kind of an extension of the sewer department of the city. And in my office, we deal with storm drain and sewer and water, and different people do different tasks. Let's see that data. We need to be able, as a city engineer, I was expecting or hoping that I could at least see the preliminary data. Let's see the flow, understanding the process, understanding that the master plan will be developed and finished and finalized. But from my perspective, as looking at development, existing infrastructure, this was the last year was the first year we put together a 10-year CIP for streets. So these pavement projects that we foresee for the city, hopefully that will help with R&R projects. But the GIS data and data that I know that's happening during the master plan process you know, we were requesting and hoping that we could at least see that data, see the preliminary data so that I could understand the existing infrastructure and the impacts.
Yeah, there's only a couple of places where there's, you're tying into existing city collections.
Right.
The north is tying into a truck main, the interceptor line, and so is the south. That's tying into an interceptor main. That data was not 100% that you received. It was draft data, so it could change. The district strives in, collaborating with the city. There was a ton of meetings. We had 2 individual meetings with each of the 3 cities. We had 2 PAC meetings. That is the process. You receive the data. It might not have been as timely as you wanted, but the district had the reasons for not sending it out right away. Because it
Could you
wasn't
elaborate on those
100%.
reasons?
It wasn't 100%. It was still in draft form. That's like me asking for your stormwater master plan right now. The other thing, as far as master planning goes, the district does have design criteria that has to be adhered to. The district has a general permit for the statewide discharge for the collection system, which I know as a city engineer for other cities, you know what those requirements are. The system is a robust system. We have to do spill reporting. So that design criteria has to meet a certain storm, and I'm not sure what storm we use, a 10-year storm. The shelf life of a master plan is, it's going to be published today, adopted by the board, and tomorrow there's a development outside of the area that you planned. It happens. It's fluid. It changes. We can always go back and amend it. That's the district's responsibility. And if there's going to be a change in that, then it would be, as directed by our board in coordination with the city. This is a very collaborative process. It's a good master plan. I think better than the last. We did flow monitoring. We did not do flow monitoring in 2016. It's very costly. The district has sunk about $1,000, I think, into this master plan. And we're working on the chapters right now. It's going to be done. The district was very happy to hear about what the city had to say. All your comments were incorporated. Part of working together, and we're basically duplicating efforts.
And from my perspective, that's what I've been asked to look at. And the data that I'm talking about is actually that draft flow data in the nodes, in the segments. And like I said, understanding it's a draft form and it's changed, but I'm charged with reviewing that from the city side. And I don't think that was the data that was provided as far as the flow in those nodes, the segments, the draft master plan data, getting into the weeds. That's what I was asked to review. And so that's.
I know that our consultant, John Wells, submitted a lot of data last year sometime, and we have not received comment on it. So I don't know that you didn't get something that you wanted, or that there was an issue with any of that data, because that has not been communicated to the district.
For time factor here, 2 hours, we've already spent 38 minutes on this. I think it's kind of pretty obvious that there needs to be more communication from the city to SKF and back and forth. Which, we can't respond to stuff like Veronica just said. She's waiting for comments too. So I'm just saying that we need to move on to the next item here pretty soon. Yeah, I think we're going to move to the next.
Are we on number 2 here?
Yeah.
I'll be brief. The district operates and maintains the sanitary sewage collections, treatment, and disposal system for the member cities. The district established those rates and collects from all the users for the operation and maintenance, refurbishment, and replacement of district-owned facilities. The wastewater treatment plant, which is rated at 8 million gallons a day and is treating about an annual average of 4.2, belongs to the district, is owned, expanded and refurbished by the district. And the interceptor system is also owned by the district. The local collection system is owned by the member city. District is charged with operating, maintaining, and refurbishing a member city collection system. Expansion of the city-owned system is responsibility of the city. The district establishes ordinance standards and planning documents for connecting and or discharging into that collection system. And all the connections to the system need to be made in accordance with those standards. I've already mentioned that we are under a statewide general order for the collection system, and we do have a waste discharge order for the wastewater treatment plant, which we probably meet discharge requirements 99% of the time. There are minimal numbers of spills for the collection system. We had 2 last year. We weathered the 2023 storms very well. And just to add a note that our collection system won the State of California Water Environment Association Award for year 2023. Questions on our operations?
Questions? Go ahead, Fernando.
Thank you, Supervisor. You know, I look at SKF's operations from a perspective of how the city's own operations and responsibilities to our citizens sort of align with your own operations. And I know in the past we've had discussions about, you know, with regard to your operations, what is the most appropriate way that you would prefer for us to request data on that you're collecting on our existing system outside of the master plan, but just operational data? You know, because in our agreement, there's a very clear to us clause about the city having the right to inspect and inquire into the manner in which the district operates this sanitary sewer facilities, to the end that said facility shall be maintained, repaired, and operated in good working order. So that's our responsibility within the agreement, to oversee, to have the right to oversee any records that SKF collects in their day-to-day operations. So what is the best way to request that information? What can we expect from SKF when we do request that information?
I think communicating it concisely, and also to not be so overburdensome. Just, hey, I need, I don't know, give me an example. Years of your CCTV is kind of unrealistic. And when we ask staff, hey, what do you need? And this has been verbal, so I hearsay. It's like, we want all of it. Well, I know our staff is here every Thursday. And that's where the communication needs to happen. And that's where it needs to be concise. And then maybe understanding what the city is looking for better. And then we can gear that information request. So, I mean, again, I think that's improved here in the last 6 to 8 months since here. But just a concise communication and why.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I would disagree that all of our requests have been overburdensome. I think we got to the point where we had to issue a PRA for data because we were not getting a response for more specific things like the McCall line CCTV or Dinuba CCTV. Those were very specific requests that we made, which we didn't receive, or the answer was, we don't have it, right? And so that raised questions about previous discussions that have been had about SKF budgeting for the CCTV on the Dinuba line, for example. And so, you know, our goal isn't to make it overburdensome for you. Our goal is just to get the data and review it, whatever you have to send us. And then so when we're getting, you know, either a lack of response or negative responses, then the only way that we can actually get it is with a PRA, which we don't want to have to do. I mean, it costs us time and money, obviously. But and that was what.
I don't want to interrupt you,
Sure.
but I am.
Mhm.
You could have simply wrote for me a formal request. Hey, we're not getting this. Can you help us? And it would have to be very specific, not, you know, a general ask before you went to a public records request. Did you ever think about that?
Yeah, we did. And we also brought it up with Mayor Robertson, who is our representative on the board, I think the issue sometimes becomes, that there's and my question was to avoid all of that, right? The question I asked just now was, how can we avoid that going forward, right? Without even having to go to the board. But to answer your question, Supervisor, it's more, we didn't go that route because we were just getting we actually went to some council meetings and talked about, some of the issues that we were seeing with the CCTV and operations budget, but we weren't getting any kind of response. It doesn't feel like, we're necessarily getting through when we have these kinds of concerns, which for whatever reason, but I think, going back to my original question to Veronica and to the board, what is the best way for us to request that information? She's saying, let's not be overburdensome. Okay, so what is the scope of these requests, and how frequent can you handle? Because we're getting caught up. I mean, we're all new staff here, right? And we don't know what was done 10 years ago with regard to the CCTV of the Dinuba line. And we're trying to understand how that history of our sewer collection system has developed over time. And we do have that weekly communication with the staff that shows up, but that's very limited. And they don't come to these meetings prepared with that historical data. So long story short, I just want to make sure that none of us are put in that position where we feel like we have to issue a PR.
If I could just respond, since I was implicated, the extent of the city's communication with me as their SKF board representative has been for help with the Clarkson lift station. We had a meeting. I was requested to follow up with SKF at a board meeting with the general manager, and we had a meeting and we talked about the Clarkson lift station and the permit process and the back and forth and the plan checks and the things that were required for that, and it got resolved. But in terms of the CCTV footage and the requests for that kind of data, that did not go through the board representative. And there was actually the city sent, while we had a special meeting on the Second Chance Animal Shelter situation, the city sent, unbeknownst to anybody on the council, I think there was a memo sent out like an hour before the meeting. The city sent the deputy city manager Keene to SKF meeting that I couldn't attend, and none of us could attend because we had another special meeting, to request a change to, I think, the capital improvement program and talking about CCTV. So that was brought up to the SKF board, but it really was independent of my review and my input as a board member. In the future, since we're skipping around from agenda item to agenda item, and which is fine. I mean, that's why we're here, to talk and air these issues out. I would definitely like to hear more from the city on their input for SKF and what they would like me to bring up in terms of the board meetings. As Chairman Mendez says, we can do that. The city can let me know, city administration can let me know, and I can bring it to an SKF meeting. The level of detail we're getting into before is maybe more of a policy advisory council issue between the general manager and the city manager. But, it comes back to, we should all be working together at all levels between the city and between SKF. And that's, I think, one of the reasons we're having this joint meeting today, to look at those ways of communicating better.
If I may, with all due respect to City Manager Santillan, yes, the request for Dinuba was very specific, and we improved on that. We got it televised and it got taken care of. But the McCall line, that was never verbal communication that I know of, that I'm aware of, between staff and SKF, and we televised that line 100 times, and you received all that data. And going back to communications, I do have some notes here where, we meet every Thursday. We can have city communication meetings, but it's, have all your city jobs to do, and SKF has all their SKF jobs to do. We have a policy advisory committee meeting where we talk about CIP, we talk about budget, we talk about master planning, we talk about whatever else comes up, district matter or city matter. Each project, there are different conditions, they can be complex, they can be simple. I mean, policy advisory committee is a good way to bring those things up. We had 3 last year. And I don't recall if that included our master planning meetings. Like I said, our staff is here every Thursday for development and for engineering. We need to be included early on with developer meetings. I know the city meets with developers frequently. We had a situation where a developer came to SKF. We talked with them, gave them the data they needed. They requested a meeting with the city as well. And we recommended, hey, you know, connect with the city and connect with us, and, you know, those things happen. Our district website has a lot of data on it. We have a flow chart for each development type. I already talked about the quarterly meetings, multiple city meetings for collection system, master planning. There's plenty of opportunity for city to bring up their concerns. It does take time when we're talking about master planning. It takes time to load up, and I have John Wells here, and I don't want to mess up the master planning process, but there's hydrographs that need to be calibrated. There's parcels that need to be loaded onto segments of the sewer main. So when there are changes, those take a little time to happen. So it is a process. And now we're talking 3 cities. So we have changes for 3 cities. We don't want to put something else that's incomplete because the district is Selma, Kingsburg, and Fowler. So as far as communications, just reiterating, points of contact. There's been a lot of turnover at the city. There's quite a few planners on board now. I think this is the first time we've had a city manager for more than 24 months in the last 10 or 15 years. So it's a process. We have to get to know each other and how the city operates, how the district operates. As far as communications, that's pretty much all I have.
Just to wrap up my question, for future requests, pursuant to our agreement for data that you're collecting as part of your operations, you want it to come from me? Can it come from my staff? Who needs to be CC'd? And what timeline do you need to be onto that?
That's a good question. I think it depends on what
Okay.
I mean, if it's an operation thing, there's a sewer coming out of Mountain Hill. I mean, immediately that's 897, 6500, and somebody comes down, that's usually from Public Works.
Well,
When it comes to improvement plans, that's going to be a Yamabe and Horn. When it comes to comments on development, it's going to be Deputy City Manager Jerome or Kamara. So we need to know who to contact.
well, the request would be coming from us to you for data is my question. Who do we send it to? Any request for data pursuant to our agreement?
Well, it depends on the data. Okay. If it's maps, if it's GIS, I mean, that can come to me or it can go to the engineering staff.
Okay.
If it's finance, Tricia Miller. If it's operations, Craig, Harry. Master planning to me, and I will probably route that to John if it's extensive and, you know, his team needs to have time to take care of those data requests.
Okay, I think what I'm getting at, and we can do that, is a more, I guess, established process so that on our side, you know, we're not overburdening you with like requests to different people and it becomes a more streamlined process. And I think we can develop that offline. For the meantime, we can definitely identify those points of contact, and all of my staff knows your staff, so there's no issue. I think the problem is sometimes when there's resistance to providing that data, how do we escalate that if needed? And hopefully it's not necessary, but if you're open to developing that kind of process, I think we can resolve that. But I think for our purposes, we need to have an established process for that.
So
PAC meeting,
you meet with Selma once a week, right?
engineering staff does.
Engineering staff. So my thought would be if there's needed data, bring it, you've got that weekly meeting, generate that request. But on the flip side too, you can have paralysis by analysis, meaning like, when was the city of Selma established? What year?
1893.
All right, I want every agenda from 1893 to today.
Send me an
And
email.
every action taken, you know, so there's, what I would say, if maybe communicate with the goal in mind, what the need is, for a given project. Because maybe you're not asking for the right data sometimes too, to help you accomplish that end. But at the end of the day, we are partners. We are partners in this. And I too would offer up that Scott, being the member on our board, maybe bounce things off of him to some of the bigger, you know, the bigger items, the visionary items that Selma has.
Well, the one time, Commissioner, that an item was bounced off, I mean, we resolved it with the Clarkson lift station. So I think that was a first time and it's success, and I think we can build on that and do that again.
Well, I think that you bring up a good point, but at the same time, you also had the chairman say that just give me an email and we'll take care of things. So, you know, you get.
No, I was that correction. Commissioner Magzig was kidding about having agenda items from 1893, and I was kidding right back to him. It was a moment of levity, Councilman.
So, you know, all in all, the four corners of the contract mean what they mean. And which we're asking for of that contract between the city of Selma and SKF back in many moons when we weren't even around. It was created. And it is a joint effort. It is a joint membership between all of us. But at the same time, as you stated, and the chairman stated, you know, we have one member that goes and gives a vote. And, you know, we all have seasons, and the cities go through seasons of elections, and they go through powers of B, right? And things change. And we all know that because we're all elected. And we all know that because we all sit in the board and we have representation, what's the best analysis and the best financing for the cities. And my concern is that, you know, we can go rounds and rounds with Veronica, I think she's the manager now, and the finance person of SKF, and say, hey, these are the ways these are the ways we need you to present the question, and this is how we're going to give it to you. My concern is that, you know, and this is with all due respect to everybody, is that we sit here elected officials to represent individuals and community members that actually pay the bill. And, you know, you look at SKF, Fowler, 12,000, 14,000, 20,000, whatever you have. Selma's 30,000. And at the end of the day, like Chairman stated, you could just email me and it took care of it. Well, at the end of the day, you're dealing with people in this community. Actually, one of the biggest portions of your guys' district, biggest impact of your district. And I just keep on seeing pushback and faces and, you know, right? But at the end of the day, we're partners. And with all due respect, we're having this meeting because we've had concerns, and I know the pushback and, you know, how you guys haven't had a city manager and, guess, you know, but there's seasons for every elected official. And there's also, what we have to do is we regroup. Hey, maybe the last 12 years, the mayorship, maybe they didn't do infrastructure. Maybe they didn't do that. Yeah. You can laugh about it and make fun of it. And you can say, hey, man, you put a board member and he didn't do his job. There's an individual here was there for 8 years. But you know what? You all know that when we get elected, we regroup and we say, hey, this is probably the past practice, but this is the best for our city in the future. And all we're asking for, all our city managers asking for, is a way we can have dialogue with you so we can be productive. So with all the joking aside and laughing and making the gestures, we're here because we're asking to better our city. So
Perfect. And I can tell you, I'm here as one board member up here, and I've been an elected official longer than anyone in this room. I can tell you the way to be effective is you need to put a plan together and stick with it. You need to have a shared vision. Now, John, I've listened to you speak quite a lot, and I appreciate you, and you've had an opportunity to sit on this board too. And I can tell you with the hat that I wear, yes, elected officials come and go, but if you keep changing a plan over and over again, you accomplish nothing and you waste money. So for me, what I would like to see today, I agree with you. We need to have better communication, but the goal needs to be how can we take Selma and allow it to grow? Because at the district, I can tell you, we have the ability to take on a lot more capacity. The challenge is building that infrastructure to get those flows to the plant. So if that is the goal today, which I hope we can kind of rally around that, use Scott more, use Buddy more. He's the chairman. He is an amazing representative of, I think he represents 9 cities, and he can be a great resource to you. But if the goal is to try to improve and grow Selma, I'm on board. I'm there with you. Let's do that together.
So as an elected official, we're always gonna be talking, right? Because that's what we do, right? We actually go and we rally people around us, right? I mean, when we run for office, we have to go and talk to our people and ask them, this is our plan, this is our vision. So you're gonna hear that because of the fact that just like in all, we have a change in leadership. We have a different opinion. You may see that, yeah, the plans change, but in reality right now, the main question is, how can we get our city manager and our staff to request something and get it back so we can start moving our agenda? Because at the end of the day, it has to do with our staff completing our projects.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Hey, John, you know, Fernando actually had a path, he just stated a few minutes ago, to resolve this. And basically you went and started, you know, talking about us making fun of you. Nobody's making fun of you guys. I mean, Fernando he started the path just a few minutes ago with Veronica, hey, how do we get this resolved? And I think they're on that path. Don't you agree with that, Fernando?
So at the end of the day, we're here to discuss as elected officials to make sure our city gets represented. And all I'm saying, if that's the path that we're gonna take, I hear it, but I'm stating as we still represent our community. We have to let you know that we're not here for any games. We're here to make sure that we just want to make sure our staff can communicate with SKF and get a good firm commitment is when they request for something to get it back. That's all. I'm not here to, you can say whatever you want, but at the end of the day, what I would like to see is more of a dialogue where our city staff meets with your city staff, and that's it.
Okay, but I think Fernando was on the path with Veronica to solve that, and that's what we're here for.
And I think we need to have helpful discussions like that, where we move forward and don't just bring up all these tangential issues, try to bring up political issues. Let's resolve our differences today and let's find that path to working together so we can make Selma grow. That's what we're here to do. The other issue is a bunch of smoke. You know, the past is the past. Let's move on from that and let's all work together. That's what we need to do so we can grow.
And one of the things, I'm just talking now as a county supervisor, our whole general plan works to push development to the cities. If there's a development that's going to happen, the county wants it to happen in their cities, especially cities like Selma. That's what we're trying to do.
If I could just add, and thank you Supervisors Magzig and Mendez. I think your support is very clear for Selma. I think from a ground level perspective, we just need to get past some of these technical issues that sometimes we run into, you know, with the agreement. You know, what's the recourse when we get pushback, right? Because how are we interpreting the language that's in the agreement? And I think all of that can be resolved. At the end of the day, we do want to partner with you, and staff and the council does need to have, like Supervisor Magzig said, a clear plan, and we're developing that plan right now. And that's why we're asking for this. So we appreciate all your feedback and support.
Want to add to City Manager Santillan, you know, it wasn't pushback on data. We needed clarity on that. And I think right now Selma is doing what they're supposed to be doing with their development. They have their Amberwood ready to go. We have Clarkson ready to go. We have the Nebraska lines ready to go. Sunset's limited capacity, but there's some ESFRs, excuse me, some units that can go in there. We have the Sheridan line, which hopefully a developer picks up and does. So there's opportunity there. We have of those 4 items ready. The Northwest sewer off of Dinuba, I mean, those plans have been checked by SKF. They're in your engineer's hands. So as far as development goes, you know, some is pushing forward. We improved on our communications with Umabi Harn to get those things done. It's just a matter of putting pipe in the ground with Amberwood, and Clarkson's going to start shortly. So as far as, you know, the district's concerned is city can push forward on their development, and we're going to be a year or 2 out on infrastructure being complete, but it's there, it's happening, and there's opportunity.
I just have what I said on the board, Veronica. I know we talked about our projects, and it's fair to say that SKF hasn't held up any projects of Selma. Is that correct? Have any of our projects been pushed back?
Or is development projects?
Right. No. Okay, thank you.
I think we kind of discussed item 3 already, didn't we? Let's go ahead and go to item 4.
So with the rate study, we had a joint meeting with the Policy Advisory Committee. And I did discuss that a little bit earlier, but to kind of give a little background on that, that was formed 10 or 12 years ago now. And it's made up of the general manager of SKF, the city managers of Kingsburg, Fowler, and Selma, and the county. Yayo, thank you. County typically doesn't show up, so it's cities
I
and
think
district.
Gene did a few times.
Not to remember him, never ready. Never ready. And that's a forum we talk about CIP and budget. So this last go around on March 14th, we had a joint meeting with the SKF board, which is not unusual. It's happened before. And a study by Raftelis, who prepared our sewer rate study, was presented. The PAC approved the recommendation, and the board approved proceeding with the Prop 218 notice. And I'll get very briefly into what that is for the proposed 5-year rate increase. And in summary, the proposed rate increase for Selma ranges from $3.78 a month to $4.88 over the 5-year period. And for Kingsburg, the range is $3.61 to $4.38. And in Fowler, the range is $3.47 to $3.53. So basically what happened at the board meeting was board approved us to send out the Prop 218 notice. These are the max rates that can be enacted over the 5-year period. And we have to set a public hearing date. So the notices have to go out 45 days before that public hearing date. Then there's a couple of readings of an ordinance, and it's quite the long process for setting any rate. So not set in stone, but the process has begun. Any questions on that?
I got a question. This might be more for Hilda, but in terms of the city setting development and impact fees, if there are some services that SKF can or won't provide because it falls back on the city to do maybe more CCTV, that kind of thing. And it's regarding a new development, even if there wasn't any sewer line already in there. Could the city pass some of these costs on to impact and development fees legally, even if there is this JPA that provides sewer services? Does the city just have to clearly delineate what it's providing as opposed to what SKF would be providing for that development?
I'm going to answer generally yes, but I'm going to defer to your city attorney to let the city know what the city can do.
Yeah, I think I need some more context to what you're asking. Are you asking if the city can use development impact fees to collect from developers, things that SKF is in charge of building?
Things that maybe SKF could provide but doesn't provide per their agreement that the city would want to provide? Would the city be allowed to do that and then pass that on to development fees?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Just clarify.
If I may, General Manager Casares, thank you for that overview of the process for the sewer rate study. I think one of the things that really stood out with this last approval of the sewer rate study, the proposed sewer rate study or adopted, was the need for this body, the council, and potentially, you know, the other city councils as well, to look at what's being proposed and to have that information in a more timely manner so that we can present it, or SKF maybe can present it at city council meetings, because as was raised during that meeting, the PAC meeting where the sewer rate study was considered, you know, the folks that are going to get the calls about these increases, they're pretty substantial increases over a 5-year course. The folks that are going to get the calls are the city council members. And so I think it's important for them to, and I understand our representative can come back after the fact and say, this is what we approved, but I think it might be more helpful to the council to see this information before it's considered by the PAC and by the board. Is there any way that the process can be adjusted in future years to be able to accommodate that, just so that everybody's on the same page about what's going to be considered and potentially approved, especially when there's such significant increases proposed?
That's a good question, and yes, noted, and I talked to another city manager that had the same concern. So yeah, we'll look at improving, maybe getting some more time out or getting an agenda out earlier, because I don't know if we can put out a rate study without it being agendized. So,
Yeah,
I mean, perhaps, you know, sending out a 2-week agenda notice or something like that.
I
We'll have to
think-
think of something of how to get that out to the public in an appropriate manner.
if you are able to commit to maybe accommodating at least an opportunity to present it at a council meeting. So whether it's 2 weeks or however long it is that we need to be able to agendize it on our council meetings, if you're able to commit to that, I think that would be super helpful. We can work from there as to how long in advance you need to know when our council meeting is going to be. But as long as you agree to that, I think we can figure that out.
Actually, we probably can put it out at a PAC meeting first, like a month before an agenda at a board meeting.
Okay, so it would go PAC, city council, then board, or SKF board. Okay, yeah. That
Because
would be perfect.
theoretically, if you see it in a pack, you can take that information back to your city council.
Exactly, which was not at all the case this last time. I feel like we were really rushed to adopt these rates, and I don't, you know, I don't want to speak for the mayor, but you know, these are very considerable impacts to our residents.
I know my add
yeah.
that's just max proposed that can change as we go through our process, our Prop 218 process. So
Well,
it- so in June, when they do the final adoption, it may be something else when we don't know. That's 2 months from now.
And I absolutely call for more input from my council when, you know, our council members, when I brought it up that we had that meeting, that, you know, we're looking at an 8% increase for 5 years annually. And that does add up, and that's to our ratepayers, and that's things, you know, this is money people have to come up with out of pocket. And that is a material cost, definitely, but you know, there are components of that. We'll talk about the components a little later, I'm sure, but just talking about with the citizens, yeah, you got to bring up, we had a cam line too that went out, and Selma's paying more as a result. That comes up too. That's a misunderstanding out there that Selma's just paying more than Kingsburg and Fowler. Well, it's because we have to pay back that loan from the state revolving fund that SKF got for the city in order to replace that McCall line, that main McCall line. So that's why those rates are a little bit higher. And I spent a lot of time explaining that, you know, and SKF is a
Well,
major.
theoretically, you have more older lines than the other two cities. So that kind of, I mean, you went into this with older lines. And then hence your rates ended up being a little bit higher all the time because of that.
We had that McCall line, it just went out. I mean, it had to be replaced and everybody
I mean,
knew it was
yeah.
just
How
when
old was that line?
when do you bite the bullet and do it? That's what it came down to. And
Right.
we had to pass that cost on to the ratepayers. That's what gets lost sometimes. You gotta pass all these costs on. There's nothing for free. CCTV is not free. It's gotta be paid for somewhere. So these are all issues that the public needs to be made aware
I
of.
think the quote is we inherit all our parents' problems.
Get a lot of them. You know, and I mean, with an older system, but in terms of the failure within the city, that hasn't been the issue with SKF. It's just been not having the lines themselves.
Right.
It's been getting that capital to put those lines in.
Yeah, and going back, you know, we had a little discussion on impact fees. One of the reasons why the city of Clovis is so successful, I mean, Nathan can talk to it more than I can, is they do have some high impact fees.
I'll tell you, it is, I got to serve with Harry Armstrong for 16 years. He, of course, was elected in 1970 and was on the planning commission prior to that. But one of the things that Harry just beat into us as council members is you want to do it right the first time. And so Fowler Trunk allowed for Clovis to grow in the 70s. If it wasn't for that, Clovis, you know, would probably still be 20,000, 25,000 people of that city today. But the city stepped forward, did it right, and put a lot of money into that trunk line, which allowed it to grow into what it is today. But I think this district was formed in the 1970s.
71.
1971, and I think with that, the district inherited all the infrastructure that the cities had put into place prior to that. Do we still have clay lined trunk lines that are out there? So I'll tell you what, one thing that maybe since a lot of the members here have been here less 5 years is take a look at where you're still using trunk lines that are 80 years old that eventually are going to collapse one day, but they're in line to be replaced. And that will really open your eyes. But making sure that you do it right when you go in and replace it is you want that line to last another 100 years. Begin to see rates stabilize as you move forward.
Ready to move to item 5?
Okay, CCTV is a hot topic. So the district has a CCTV program. So in each city, we do have dollars plugged in. And that's just based on how much we can afford. So we do as much. And this last year, I know there was a little consternation about there not being a whole lot in the city of Selma because we had some other projects that needed to get done. But it's there in a 10-year CIP. We use our expertise. There's a lot of district knowledge on where to televise. So that's what we target. We target a little bit larger mains and older parts of town. And those become our priorities. If there is an issue that is reported by a collections staff, then if we're not doing it as part of the 10-year CIP, we will go out and televise it. Or if there's a need from the city. A couple examples are, I think you guys paid for it. We televised Nebraska and then the alley project that we are doing prior to your paving project. We had to go out and televise that because it wasn't part of our 10-year CIP. I just have to say that staff has a lot of historical knowledge and that's how we determine where we put those funds, and it's based on what we have available.
Thank you, General Manager. And, you know, this is a very important topic, I believe, and to Supervisor Magzig's point about us knowing what our oldest infrastructure is so that we can get ahead of it and then do it right. You know, this is, for us, being newer to the Selma community than some of the district staff, it's helpful for us to understand what your thought process is. I mean, you alluded a couple of times to your historical knowledge, the district knowledge, and for us, it's important to understand what is that knowledge that you have, so then we can take control over the planning, the financing of these CIP projects that potentially the district is not going to be able to fund. And so I think what might be helpful when it comes to CCTV, I know, we've reviewed SKF's, operating plan, and we've provided comments at different meetings about what's been budgeted for CCTV and then what's actually been expended for CCTV, which don't always necessarily align. I think, putting that issue aside, and maybe we can talk about it, we also, I believe it would be helpful if we were able to get a solid list of like how these CCTV lines are being prioritized, and then understanding what your knowledge is that went into how these lines are being prioritized, whether it's the age of the lines or the material or the diameter or the impact of infill development on these lines. Those are all things that we don't really know right now. It's all budgeted within SKF's, budget, and this is the number and this is what we're going to spend. Sometimes it gets spent, sometimes it doesn't. But from our perspective, we don't have that knowledge about where those lines actually are that are 80 years old, that need to be CCTV'd. So it would be helpful for us to be able to see maybe like a schedule and a prioritization formula or some sort of, basis for how that's being prioritized. Because I know you do have a lot of knowledge that we don't have, but we're just trying to catch up to you.
So just kind of going back to the statement about your prioritizing your projects in CIP, we see CCTV lines that aren't going to be receiving any new development. So it's our expertise that we use to televise those lines. There's no new development there. If they're broken, cracked, they have a large sag in it. I mean, those are kind of the criteria we look at. But our board depends on our expertise on R&Ring the system. So it's a 6-inch replacing a 6-inch, or we're going to cure and place pipe that. But as far as that is our role in the service agreement, is to R&R the lines. And our whole discussion here, where we're talking about development, what new needs to be put in. And I would just say that I think we're kind of duplicating efforts if you are looking at all that, unless you're going to be applying for a grant or plugging in something into a CDBG, which the district is not eligible for. Then, I would see that as being really helpful. But we're looking at all the alleys in the ABC Street, little parts in the southwest side of town. We're looking at between McCall and Floral. That is our whole area that it needs attention, and that's where we're going to be focusing on. And as we get more televising data, then it might knock some projects off, because we might find a line that's worse than the first line or the second line. But as far as operations of the city, our rehab and replacement program for collections doesn't affect your future growth, unless we're tying into northwest Selma side and southwest Selma side. So that's where those things are really crucial as far as growing the city.
And
If
go ahead.
if I could real quick, I'd like to jump on to a couple of things. One thing that the director spoke of a second ago is the fact that we still have a lot of VCP or clay pipe in the ground. A lot of it's probably outlived its life expectancy. And coming from an infrastructure background, one of the most crucial parts of having a product live its life expectancy or outliving its life expectancy is maintenance. If we are not, in my opinion, if we are not performing a regular scheduled CCTV video inspection and proper scouring and maintenance of the lines, you are diminishing the life expectancy of that infrastructure, period. And so jumping on to what City Manager Santillan said, is for us to be able to understand
how we need to be prioritizing our CIP projects. We have to do that outside of SKF. And for us to receive the information appropriately through the proper channels is imperative for us to do our job for the citizens of Selma. So I'm listening to all this that's going on, and what I really care about as the Director of Public Works is, are we getting the maintenance that we're contracted for, the proper CCTV video footage that we're contracted for, in a manner that is appropriate and accommodating to the city of Selma? I can tell you one of my biggest issues here after 4.5 months here is that we have done a lot of our own CCTV work on our storm drain infrastructure. I've already identified 2 locations in town that we have cross bores. So if we're not getting regular video inspection in this sandy, loamy, very permeable material that we're in, the chances of us finding a leak on a cracked or a intruded pipe from a crossbore or other fashions is going to be very difficult for us to even identify. So again, how are we getting the CCTV video footage and the regular maintenance? I'd like to see an SOP from SKF. I'd like to see what your standard operating procedure is. I mean, what I'm hearing is that from your knowledge, your staff's knowledge, you are just going out and you are picking the areas that you're choosing to maintain. I'd like to know how many miles of collection system between Fowler, Selma, and Kingsburg there are. I know that SKS has 1 truck that's maintaining all that system right now. So again, this falls back to maintenance and proper care of the infrastructure, because Selma is a small community, just like Fowler and Kingsburg. We don't have millions of dollars to throw out every year to replace infrastructure and CIP projects. So again, jumping on with City Manager Santion, this is a super important topic for us, especially for me coming from the director's position.
Well, I think our operation and maintenance speaks for itself. We only had 1 spill in Selma, and it was caused by somebody hitting the clean out top of a force main. There's 173 miles. Yeah, district staff cleans half of that every year. And then we have high maintenance areas where our truck is at in all our 3 cities. So there's more maintenance where more maintenance needs to happen. As far as CCTV, I would just go back. We know where the older parts of town are. We know where our trouble's at. We get our baseline, and there's really no rule of thumb for how often you televise. So once we get the baseline, I mean, we'll look at it and say, that pipe is okay. I'm not going to go CCTV PVC pipe. It's going to be where we know there's clay or concrete. We get our baseline. They're going to be mostly in alleys. What are the chances of there being a crossbore or other thing? If anything, it would be water line leaking, or them putting in water meter boxes. So I think our CCTV program is solid. We have what we need. We have projects for 10 years. It's on the CIP. And as we gather more CCTV or more knowledge from staff, then that document will change. It is fluid. I don't know if, John, you want to add anything on the televising?
Excuse me. I would add on the sorry, I'm not as used to this as you folks are. The only thing that I would add on the televising is that if we had infinite money, we would like to televise stuff all of the time. And as we talked about, the district is looking at rate increases, and those are substantial. And so it's always a matter of balancing the risk of what can happen versus how much money we can spend in order to prevent that. And I think the standard is spills, and the district has minimal spills, which I think indicates that the risk is being handled appropriately now. The rule of thumb used to be, for a while, it was every piece of infrastructure should be televised every 5 years, and then that was changed to be televised every 10 years. And now the rule of thumb that we sort of see in the industry is that it needs to be data driven. So if you televise a piece of infrastructure and there's nothing going on there, there's no reason to return to it unless you have some reason to believe that there is something going on there. So agree that this should be formally stated and a procedure should be put in place, certainly. But I think that the spills level, especially spills that are not caused by accident or not caused by wet weather and stuff like that, but that would actually be caused by maintenance issues, indicates appropriate inspection.
Okay, so real quick, going back to what you said, Director, about the city having a procedure in place for how we gather information, is SKF going to put a written procedure in place that we can understand for how you choose where your CCTV video footage is taken? And on top of that, can we get a map showing the locations that are the only locations that you will CCTV? Because I'm hearing that there's certain lines you won't even look at them, you won't even consider them. So I think the city deserves to have a map showing those locations so that the city staff can decide whether we want to invest in CCTVing the rest of our infrastructure to collect information that we need for engineering. I think that that's a fair request.
I don't see why you CCTV for old lines or for the whole collection system. I'm failing to see what the point of that is.
So it's up to SKF. They decide how they pick and choose what they want a video footage on. The city has the right to do the same thing. We have the right to go out. It's actually our infrastructure. So we can go out and CCTV anything that we want to at any given time. So for an example, the first month that I was here, there were 2 people that called City Hall, not SKF, that had sewer backups in their houses. And so I got stuck going out there because all my staff was gone on a Friday. And I got stuck going out there not knowing anything about the system, not having any maps to look at of anything that was previously scoured, maintained or cameraed by SKF, and was kind of had that dumped in my lap. So after that happened, trying to dig in and go through the process of what information I could find, it was limited as far as a maintenance schedule.
Mike, you call
Yeah.
SKF. That's what we're here for. We're 24/7.
Veronica, SKF did get the phone call because I know that's who I call. The resident didn't call SKF. The resident called the city. I called SKF. You had someone respond. The deal here is that we do not have any kind of mapping showing what you are maintaining. You are picking and choosing what you want to maintain, what you want to video, and I'm just trying to find out how the city can get a map or some kind of a SOP showing what your procedure is and how you guys move through that process. That's it.
SKF hydro flushes, many of the lines in the city of Selma, probably all of them. So that's how we operate and maintain. That is ours. They're on a schedule. It's 2 years or 3 months or 6 months. We get quite a few calls and we respond within 45 minutes, and that's day or night, just like public works, when a tree goes down or there's a pothole or a sinkhole somewhere. We frequently, when we have customers come and call us or at a public event or even with city staff, we always give the information, call SKF first. PD knows to call SKF first. Mike, there's no reason you should be out there dealing with a backup into the house. That needs to come to SKF. We need to verify that the mains are clear, and that is our operation and maintenance responsibility. The R&R is our responsibility too. That's what SKF does.
Just a quick comment. It is extremely unusual for a sewer provider, SKF, to be doing residential calls like that. Typically in other jurisdictions, if a resident has a backup, they call a plumber. The plumber will snake that lateral, and if the plug is on the property owner's side, they own it. If it turns out to be in the city, well, then the city's gonna have to own it. But my understanding, the service that SKF provides here, way above and beyond. Maybe a discussion we need to have is, if we want to cut rates a little bit to customers, we stop doing house calls and tell them to call a plumber. But Clovis doesn't have, I'm not aware of any other cities than Selma, Kingsburg, and Fowler that have the district actually respond to house calls, higher level of service. But to your point, are you about older pipes in the city? Are you seeing issues where, you know, we have manhole covers or we've got sewage overflowing out of them, or collapses, or streets that are sinking because maybe there's some type of partial collapse, anything like that?
I'm seeing nothing of the sort. I'm trying to collect information for my own knowledge and for staff's knowledge. And again, falling back to City Manager Santion in the agreement, it says that we have the right to access that information. So I'm not gonna go back and beat a dead dog. All I'm trying to do is get information for my own knowledge, understanding what your maintenance schedule is for scrubbing the lines, and how you guys go about the CCTV video footage. That's all I'm trying to figure out.
And to Director Han's point, just to liken it to other infrastructure that the city maintains, right? We have a 10-year CIP for streets and roads, and the way that we determine how we're gonna prioritize that, the maintenance of those roads is through the pavement management index, right? And it tells us what's worn and, you know, what is cracked and all those kinds of things. And, you know, I think Mr. Wells acknowledged that there should be a standard operating procedure for how we identify what needs to be CCTV'd, because it is part of the maintenance process. And I think all we're getting at is, okay, we understand you have the expertise and the knowledge. Can we put that down into a written format that we can look at and say, okay, this is where we need to prioritize. SKF is not going to address this, but there's some other issues going on. And because it's how we take control of our own infrastructure, right? And completely understand you're responsible for the R&R and addressing those kinds of things. But I think from our perspective, you know, there's going to be turnover at SKF at some point, right? How do we prepare? Hopefully not too soon, Hilda. You know, how do we prepare and get ourselves a solid foundation to be able to carry forward our infrastructure when the folks that have this expertise and this knowledge are no longer there? What's the standard that we're going to have for the level of and the quality of our infrastructure if we're just relying on, you know, just this very I don't want to say wishy-washy, but it's just ephemeral, right? It's not based on data that we can actually look at.
Do you have an example of another jurisdiction that you want to emulate as it relates to CCTVing, something like that, maybe you could provide to the board?
Sure. I mean, we can come up with something. I don't have it off the top of my head, but if that would be helpful,
It
absolutely.
would be helpful to
Yeah.
me. So I make the request for, you know, just myself as a director, so I can take a look at that. So for me, the goal is to be effective in whatever the city's goals are. Back to the master plan, sewer master plan, to the extent that master plan is accurate and doesn't deviate much, I think that's to the benefit of the city. And understanding what the goals and priorities are of the city. And I appreciate Public Works Director and making sure that as we are doing our projects and you're doing yours, that we align so we don't tear up streets frequently. I'm all in for doing that.
I could add, I think this could be a simple exercise. I was just having a sidebar conversation with the city engineer, and some staff will laugh. I mean, the GIS data can carry some of the CCTV recent dates, right? And that would make it inherently easier with sharing that data to show in a visual format that makes it easy to digest, right? Of what areas have been done, or providing a 10-year plan of what's being CCTV'd. I've heard that, you know, the engineering basis for CCTV in terms of doing it every 5 years, 10 years, or as needed based off of some, you know, baseline information or some criteria is the current methodology for conducting CCTV. However, as was pointing out by city staff, mainly myself, at the district board meeting, the district has a plan that dictates how often they're supposed to CCTV all their lines currently. Every 7 years in the management plan, and $250,000 allocated in the budget. I understand the rate study and cash flow becomes an issue, but when there is a plan adopted, as you know, board member Mazik said, sticking to the plan is inherently what we should be doing. And if it's written down in its current policy adopted by our governing bodies, that should be the baseline, and it can be amended. I don't have an issue with amending the plan if the standards change, but it's just if it's documented and those type of items dictate how we operate, then we would just like to see that information as has been discussed. I don't want to, again, beat a dead horse over here. I'm just saying, we all have plans that we're obligated to follow as adopted by our governing board. And I hear on both sides that we should be following.
One question on the CCTV, because it keeps coming up a lot. As I understand it, you've been given the CCTV information, I don't know for how many years, but all that's been given to the city, correct? You received that?
The recent video that I had in those files was 2016.
Okay.
Well, this is the first time I heard you haven't been able to open them. Some of them came off of old DVDs, so, you know, I can't, speak to how beatable that is, but,
The
that was given to the city of Selma last year.
The CIP is 65,000 a year for the city of Selma. And am I hearing correctly that the city really doesn't know how much they're gonna use for CCTV until they know what SKF has done in terms of CCTV? Does that have to go first? So that CIP number is a placeholder. It's not really relevant, right? You gotta know where you're gonna CCTV and where you need to go.
I think the issue is programming it out over time based on the criteria that's been discussed, so we can coordinate if we need to do additional CCTV beyond what the criteria dictates, right? Or if there's evidence that dictates such a.
Every 2 years. I hear the rule of thumb used to be 2, then it was 5, now it's 10, and if it's not broken, don't fix it,
Right.
leave it alone.
So,
Can I ask a question? We're budgeters on the board, and I know we're kind of coming to the end here, but we're
real quick.
budgeters. How do we amend the 65,000? I mean,
And
what's
Mayor,
the
great
process?
question, but one thing that's very important that's coming to light. So the CCT issue keeps coming up. We gave the CCTV information to you. You were not able to open a lot of the data, which I'm hearing we just found out about that today. So this gets back to communication, and I can appreciate wanting to have access to the CCTV. We're willing to give it to you. So maybe what the next step needs to be is those files that you can't open, let us know what those are and be reasonable. So if you want to go back a year or two or a specific period or a specific line where we have data, let us know what you want to look at so we can help you open that information. I think that would be great.
I think that's fair. I think in addition to that, if there was some sort of summary or an index showing what segments, what nodes, what has been done, if there's some sort of historical record or list, as I stated, I think sometimes the map is sometimes the best way to convey that, because you can show the older segments in red and the newer segments in green. And that's a very, I'm sorry, Mike, that's just a very easy way to convey the information. And so apart from reviewing the data and having someone sit and review the data, which is very time consuming, having a baseline summary of that information in an index would be extremely helpful.
Who would compile that baseline information in an index? Would that be SKF? Okay. And then just in terms of the budgeting, this is an opportune time to have this meeting because CIP has not been established yet. The master plan is still in process and the budget is still in process. So none of this is set in stone and there's still time to communicate. That's what I'm hearing a lot today. So everybody gets together and, you know, if we need to revise those numbers at 65,000 a year for this all important CCTV, then that's what needs to happen based on data. Let's do it, you know, so I think we have a launching point today. As long as we two can work together.
So I just wanted to say, first of all, I wanted to thank everybody for coming here today and having this conversation. I know it was a much needed conversation that needed to be had, but I've heard the word historical knowledge. I've heard the word new staff. I've heard the word, you know, how can we work better together? And so that's what the purpose of today's meeting is. And so the fact that, you know, we do have new staff and we have staff that is very knowledgeable. You know, no one at this table has that historical knowledge that SKF has. And that's exactly what we're needing. Our staff is wanting to work together. with SKF to get the information so that we can move the city forward. And so, the fact that the maps are very important, I always think, I'm in property management. So for me, I know that mapping is very important. I need to know at my properties where the emergency lines are, the water, the water mains, the gas lines. I need to know all of that. So that is what I hear that the new staff is doing, is that they want to be able to identify in our city where all of these different lines are so that they can work better and help our developers, right? And help our citizens and so that we know and we have that knowledge, because at the end of the day, the historical knowledge, the institutional knowledge, there is no price on that. And so this staff here, city staff, just wants to have that information. And so I think that communication, instead of like holding it and saying, no, this is mine, let's share it and let's talk about that, because at the end of the day, we're wanting to grow and we want to be able to, we have a lot of areas that need to grow. I've had developers tell me, I want to go over and, build something on Dinuba, but I can't because SKF told me I can't. So those are the things that I'm hearing, that I don't like to hear that, because I want to be able to grow. We do need to have more growth in that area, all across the city. But I think that today's conversations and I think that the goal for today is more about share that institutional knowledge so that this staff can do what we need to do. And I know that we've had previous staff that was here that, you mentioned it, we've had a lot of turnover. Well, we have very competent staff that wants to move the city forward and wants to be able to work with these developers so that we can have that growth like Clovis did, like putting in the infrastructure correctly so that we can have, the surrounding areas grow. Everyone around here knows our arena numbers, we need to meet those. We have no housing. We have no affordable housing. We have nothing. And so we need to be able to work together to have, growth and to be able to support our citizens. And so I just wanted to, kind of give that little 2 cents as to, the goal is to get, at the end of the day, is have the growth, in our area. So I just wanted to share that.
I think those are, you're talking, I appreciate what you said, but we're talking apples and oranges here. We're talking about maintaining an old system that has nothing to do with potential growth. That's a little different deal. Oh, it is.
Supervisor Mendez, I just want to make sure we're going to have time to talk about the budget and CIP item.
Yeah. You talking about what, you want to go to number 6?
Just because we only have about 13 minutes left of the
Okay,
meeting.
that's fine.
If I could chime in, we're going to talk a little bit about budget. Again, just to try to educate a little bit more, I've heard some misinformation, but for SKF, there are several parts of our budget. We have our operation and maintenance. We have our refurbishment and replacement of district infrastructure. And we have our 3 cities that we collect money for maintenance and collection of the collection system. And you had mentioned, expansion of Selma in the same words as SKF, and that we are not helping with that expansion. We don't help with expansion per se. That is the city's obligation for expansion. What we collect fees for Selma alone is the refurbishment and replacement of existing lines. That's where our CCTV is. It doesn't have anything to do with expansion or any of that. It's the old lines that we're talking about. That's our responsibility to collect money and maintain and repair it. And you're asking for CCTV information and on all this stuff on the lines. And I'm a little confused because that's our responsibility. Great. If we want to give, that CCTV information, are you going to budget more money for your budget to maintain that? I'm not quite sure what that aspect of needing that CCTV is, but we're happy to give it to you. Yes, those are your lines, but we are responsible as per the agreement of collecting and maintaining that. For example, this, the amount that we of revenue for this budgeted year for Selma only was $656,974. Okay. Of that amount, we collect just for the Selma residents for that fixing the infrastructure that's already there. Of that 656,000, 263,844 goes to repaying the Selma McCall sewer line, that SRF loan. Okay. With the rest is what we have to do is emergency repairs, CCTV, projects like these sewer improvements and such. For this year, we have $1.2 million scheduled for those activities. That includes the SRF fund. Okay, so obviously we're not having enough revenue to come in to pay for these projects. So we're dipping into some of our reserves. We collect money and sometimes we don't do projects as big of projects in a year because we have to save up to do the project in the second or third year. Okay, sometimes we program X amount for CCTV, but we have a emergency in somewhere that we have to repair and it takes that money in that year. So that's kind of how the money we collect for Selma goes for the repair and replacement of Selma collection system infrastructure.
Point well taken. What is the amount of reserve you have per city? You could just give us Selma's. We don't need to know what Fowler and Kingsbury is.
So the reserve for each city, we have part of the reserve,
What's Selma's? We care about Kingsbury and Fowler, but we just wondered what's Selma's reserve.
Okay, I'm gonna answer that now, okay? Okay, so 263,000 we have to have in reserve to pay our SRF fund, or our SRF loan. We also have 3,000, or was it a little bit more?
I don't have the reserve policy memorized. I
Yeah.
want to say, I'm not sure what it is for
It's
some.
policy that our
fine.
board is
Okay.
reserve.
So that's fine.
And then we have an X amount for capital improvement projects. So
Point
we
well
have a
taken.
reserve policy that our board has.
Point well taken. And I want to go back real quick because I want to go back to, are we at the number 6 or are we discuss? We at number 6?
So we got 8 minutes.
No, let's go to number 6. I'd rather just,
Yeah,
I'll ask.
that was part of the budget part.
Okay.
So do we need to talk more about the budget or
Yeah.
is that clear? Okay. Questions about?
I think just in
The-
general, before
General,
we
okay.
move on, there is just a high level of discrepancy that I see because the budget, I think it's very clear that it's pretty much all focused on existing lines, right? Because that's what SKF is responsible for maintaining. I think at some point we have to look at whether the fact that SKF is master planning new lines that the city is then required to build ourselves is a problem for the city, right? Whether there's a more opportunity for misalignment there. If you're planning growth, which we're required to build. And so I think that's probably a topic for another discussion.
Well, real quick on that, as I understand it, as you have a development and the developers put that line in that the city requires, I
Mhm.
think you can turn that line over to the district at some point.
Mhm.
And then in the future, we charge to maintain that particular line.
Sure.
You build it and then turn it over to the district once it's complete.
Yeah, and I'm just referring to the planning of it, right? Like how I think to better align general plan and the vision of the council and the community with the development of the infrastructure, my perspective, those should combine with the same agency, right? And again, that's a broader discussion, but I think that's partly where I see some of that from. And for a long time, it wasn't understood that SKF, it only deals with the existing lines, right? I think for a long time, people had this misconception that SKF, puts in new sewer line. That's why now we're putting in Amberwood trunk line because we know that that's our responsibility. So anyway, but moving on to the budget, if I'm a supervisor, or excuse me, to the CIP. The reason I wanted to discuss that was, we, last year during the budget development process and the CIP development process, we made some comments to the staff about how you're accounting for the cost of these different CIP projects over a 10-year horizon, and whether, the cost that you assign to a specific project now is going to be the same cost when it's built out, in 8 years, right? And we don't see, or we haven't seen some of those inflationary figures kind of being accounted for. And our deputy CM and city engineer can maybe elaborate on this, but we just wanted to know, and I asked this question at our PAC meeting last time, how are we accounting for these inflationary issues that we're having, where what it costs to build today is definitely not what it's going to cost to build in 5 years, right? So city engineer, DCM, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think the city manager covered it. I think just the concern from a budgetary standpoint, as it's been discussed, a cash flow issue is making sure there's not a gap in funding or an overrun in budget because we're not accounting for basic factors such as inflation, rising construction costs, what have you, over the horizon of the CIP.
And I think at the meeting, the city manager at Kingsburg brought up a point about how he sat in on the CIP 5 years ago, 5 years ago, and said, these reserves are a little out of hand. Having to have 100% of the budgeted reserve of the CIP and at 50% of the operations and maintenance was exorbitant, and it impacts rates. And that's why these rates, it's also a driver for the rates and could be looked at in the future too. And I think we as board members look forward to the people getting in the nuts and bolts, the policy advisory committee getting together and taking a look at those reserves and maybe working that out with the general manager and with council and making some recommendations to the board in the future on that. That's another issue that could help with the rates as we see them.
From my perspective, I think from, budgeting these projects, looking forward, we're doing engineers' estimates on our street projects. And as we can try and align the projects together so that we're not redoing work, I would like to see the engineers' estimates for your R&R projects as you are looking at your CIP. The decisions were made before I was here on the Nebraska line, and that was an R&R project. Certain amount of money budgeted for it from SKF, and then the city was going to upsize it. And I think now that we had it built, it was twice as much of what the cost was of what was originally budgeted. So the city had to fund that. So looking at those engineers' estimates of the CIPs so that we can better align our street projects with the R&R projects and what's budgeted from SKF so that we can use the city money or funds that we have for our projects in a better way is one request that I would have.
You currently collecting impact fees from developments which go to certain sectors of the city, and so you've got pots of funds that can be tapped into right now? For sewer as well? Perfect. And so if there's an opportunity for us to bridge what's available in projects that we have for CIP, I think that's great.
We just need the data, or I would ask for the ability to work through those engineers' estimates, how they're budgeted in CIP as opposed to just a lump sum. I don't know what's going into that number so that we can line our projects as well.
Yeah, and I think I posed the question to General Manager Casares at the last PAC meeting, and I think the answer that I got was, from based on your experience about what these things cost, you have notes and you have, historical data, but it's not something that maybe we can, or if maybe it is, that's something, if you can send us like the linear fee, what's your estimate on this, the labor part of it, what's the, and then we can compare and contrast so that we can make sure we're planning appropriately for our future projects that align with your sewer projects.
I'm putting that together. Have it sent over to you.
Thank you.
God, and I think this will probably be my last comment on the escalation factor that that is built into our sewer rate model. So I think as presented by Ralph Tellis, we, I think it was a 3 or 5%. I can't remember right. So then the last sewer rate model, which was 5 years ago, also has escalation factors. So our 5-year plan has escalation factors for construction, I believe, and then there's a bunch of other things that were about 5 or 6 things around that list, chemicals and power and some other things like that.
Yeah, and I think the discrepancy was, there was, you're accounting for 3%. I think that's what the number was, inflation. But over the last 5 years, inflation has been a lot more than that, right? And so going forward, does it need to be higher than 3%? And then, that also doesn't align with the increases in the sewer rates, right? For a lot of other reasons. But I just think applying a, almost arbitrary 3% across the line doesn't really work. And I think we probably need to be a little bit more diligent as to how we're applying the escalation factor there.
That's a great comment. However, that will affect our rates.
Understood. And that's exactly
you
why
know,
we
so
need to
then
do
we
it.
have to claw
Yeah.
back things and, I mean, estimating too is kind of an art, right now with, the climate of things. Things really haven't gotten better in terms of, labor or getting certain kinds of equipment here on time. I know, your city engineer is probably well aware of, volatile, and it just depends. This week might be great. Next month, we might blow a budget out of the water. So
Yeah, and I think the
be an
goal,
art.
I think the goal is just to get better data and better estimates so that we can plan better, whether that's, different rates that we're charging, well then that's gonna justify the projects that we build, or the projects that we build are gonna justify these rates, right? But if we're in a position where we're not charging enough or we're charging too much, then, there's always gonna be this discrepancy between what we're allocating. Because when we allocate certain funds, at least on our side, that means we can't use those funds for other things, right? And so then we're pushing things further and further out. But I just, I think if we can get to some sort of understanding as to, at least for the Selma projects, those are being accounted for or estimated, then I think that would be helpful for everyone.
It's generally a 5-year process because, public entities don't want to have to undergo the process multiple times. It's costly to do that. However, you as a city could request the board of directors to conduct another study for you in a year if you want to do other bells and whistles and have your rates go higher.
Yeah, all I'm saying is that when we're looking at inflation, that we look at more specific ways of accounting for that with the 5-year study. Okay.
I think with that, I think we're done. We're past 11 o'clock. I'm gonna pose this to Fernando. When this is all over, why don't you send me a memo? I don't want a 10-page memo, but a short memo saying from this meeting, we would like to see this completed. We talked about it, but,
I'd be happy to do that.
what's the highest priority? Is it, hey, can we have more information on actually the lines themselves, the old lines, what our analysis is on them?
More communication. That's what I heard today. Better communication, more detailed communication. Moving forward, that's all of us. Thank you, everybody, for coming out today.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for coming out as camp work.
Yeah, from what I hear, a lot of lack of communication.
Yeah, no, we need to work on that. I think if you ever want to get out and talk about the issues between our cities, absolutely.